Hello, and thank you for clicking on our video. In this video, we will be presenting evidence that we were astonished to come across, of a Sky Sports F1 presenter, slamming Max Verstappen as fake and reckless amongst other invectives. We were astounded by this discovery because the presenter and Sky Sports have been amongst Max's staunchest supporters. They have been instrumental in building up the myth surrounding him, so we were rather surprised to find them undermining all their years of hard work. The question we are asking is this presenter getting off the Max hype train, or are Sky Sports signaling a change of direction, or none of the above? We present the evidence and look forward to hearing your opinions in the comments section, including those of Maxipads like Dolphy, who are able to conform to the YouTube community guidelines. But before going further to present the evidence for your attention, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next video is uploaded. As many of you are aware, Sky Sports and most, if not all of their presenters, have led the way in proclaiming Max's greatness. For example, their chief F1 analyst and commentator, Martin Brundle, has repeatedly pronounced Max as one of F1 greats, and ranked him above 8th-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. David Croft, his co-commentator, was one of those in the forefront of gaslighting the robbery in Abu Dhabi, who attempted to represent during his live commentary that Marcy was entitled to rig the race. Jenson Button, former world champion and teammate of Lewis Hamilton, has labeled Max the most talented driver in F1 history. So, Sky Sports have been in the vanguard of gaslighting the theft in 2021, and laundering Max's image as one of the best drivers ever in F1 to boot. For the record, there have been some commentators like Anthony Davidson, who held at the time, and continue to hold the view, that the Abu Dhabi final was manipulated. He has been known to criticize Max Verstappen, so it was not surprising, for example, that he found Max guilty of causing the Austria collision with Lando Norris. There are others like Karen Chandok, who initially held the view that Abu Dhabi was manipulated, but has since gone on to become part of the Max Verstappen image laundering brigade at Sky Sports. So, we believe that the Sky Sports presenters can be ranked on a spectrum, according to their willingness and ability to gaslight Abu Dhabi 2021, and launder Max's image. We would put Anthony at the tip of the opposite end of the spectrum to those that are renowned for their willingness and ability to gaslight Abu Dhabi and launder Max's image. This is why we were particularly stunned to find the person at the top of the opposite end of the spectrum to Anthony, slamming Max over his collision with Lando Norris, in Austria. By now, some of our regulars will know who we are talking about, but for the sake of examining their opinion on its own merit, we will not mention their name at this point. The comments in question were made during their review of the Austrian Grand Prix, under the subsection titled, Max's Default Driving Tactics Resurface. The title itself speaks volumes and calls into question what Max's default driving tactics are. As we all know, when Max first came into F1, he had a reputation for dangerous and reckless driving, which prompted all the other drivers, and many others involved with the sport to complain. The FIA subsequently introduced the Verstappen rule, which outlawed moving under braking, which was Max's default driving tactic of defending any attempt to overtake him. Over the years, as the image laundering brigade got to work, they attempted to suggest that Max had outgrown this tactic to become the great driver that they like to say he is today. For example, in 2022, this presenter was referenced in many publications for praising Max's fair and professional driving, in an attempt to suggest that he had moved on from the driving tactics that had littered his 2021 season. Could this be the same 2022 season where Max repeatedly made false complaints about the early championship leader, Charles Leclerc, in a vain attempt to get the stewards to gift him a victory like they had the previous season? Or was this Max's main image launderer trying to launder the 2022 image that was reminiscent of that of 2021? Well, never mind, let us now delve into the body of the section under review. We all know that Max, the greatest driver of his era, does not fare well in close quarters driving, where the likes of Charles Leclerc and Sir Lewis have beaten him roundly, and he is prone to getting angsty and trying to get the stewards to give him an unfair advantage. We therefore could not believe it, as Max's number one image launderer described him as angsty during the close quarters battle with his busy mate Lando Norris, in the run-up to the collision. Was this person engaging in their usual bait-and-switch technique, where they set out the obvious criticism first, before following up with their specious justification or excuse? A bit like what they did in Abu Dhabi, where they suggested that what Marcy did was harsh on Sir Lewis, but within the rules, and provided the racing finish befitting of the season. The problem with that strategy was the initial admission that Max was getting angsty in a throwback to his default driving tactic. This begs the question of how the greatest driver in his era can be prone to getting angsty during close quarters driving, where he is the one responsible for the dangerous driving. Surely a driver befitting of the accolade of greatest would relish these battles like Sir Lewis does, rather than bemoan them. Max's number one fan and image launderer then went on to describe him as getting ever more aggressive in defending against Lando. Again, another astonishing admission that Max was reverting to the default driving tactic, which his image launderer had claimed had disappeared during a period where in a vastly superior and budget cap-breaking car, he was cruising to 2 titles and numerous records. The aggressive driving that ultimately caused the collision, which put his busy mate and championship rival out of the race, thereby helping him to extend his championship lead. Was that fair and professional driving, or a professional foul? Well, as Max's number one fan and image launderer stayed true to their gaslighting antics, they made their first attempt to justify his aggressive driving by claiming that, while Max was really pushing the limits of acceptable driving in close combat, with late moves in the braking zones, he was just about getting away with it. Now, the interesting thing to note here is that Max's number one fan and image launderer was pushing this opinion after he had supposedly received the maximum sanction available under the rules for causing the collision. Here they are in black and white, admitting to the whole world that the stewards were allowing Max to get away with late moves in the braking zone, which has been outlawed. Is it that these people have gone so far down the rabbit hole of defending Max, that they now openly admit that he is allowed to get away with breaking the rules, without realizing what they are saying, because they have twisted themselves inside and out so badly? You can only be getting away with doing something that is wrong. So, what this person was effectively saying was that the stewards were allowing Max to get away with doing something that was wrong. It is particularly telling that the stewards did not punish Max for moving more than once under braking, even though his image launderer referred to late moves, i.e. more than one move. The stewards, including the now compromised Johnny Herbert, only punished Max for causing a collision, which is a separate offense to moving more than once under braking. In their usual format, the stewards and the image launderers sprinkled some blame on Max's victim and busy mate, to muddy the waters, and gaslight the fact that those who go up against him in close quarters are forced to match his energy, because that is the only way of getting the stewards to take action. Can you imagine, the stewards sanctioned Lando, who was forced to exceed track limits, because Max was pushing him off track, by making late moves under braking, without sanctioning Max for moving under braking? The stewards' ruling recorded clearly that Max caused the collision by moving left, so if according to Lando and Max's image launderer he did this several times, why the heck was he not punished for that as well? Does anyone recall 2019, when the stewards allowed Max to steal victory from Charles, by barging him off track in Austria, under the let them go racing excuse, and Charles responded in the following race at Silverstone, by keeping a faster Max behind him, until the stewards again allowed Max to get away with exceeding track limits to effect an overtake? Anyway, this is not about the stewards and Johnny, so let us move on. We come now to what we consider the most damaging admission by Max's image launderer, and one which yet again the stewards failed to punish him for. Max's number one fan stated that, what he found alarming was that immediately after the collision, while both drivers were limping along, Max tried to impede and collect his busy mate, just in case he was able to continue, and Max wasn't. Yes folks, you heard right. This so-called paragon of fair and professional driving tried to impede and collect his championship rival after a collision. Does anyone recall Michael Schumacher winning his first title in 1994 by collecting his then busy mate and championship rival, Damon Hill, after he had crashed his car during the season-ending race at Australia? This singular act, which has tainted Michael's legacy, has led many to argue that he is not a seven-time world champion, because the 1994 title, which he won by 1 point, would have gone to Damon Hill instead, had his busy mate and scuba diving partner not collected him as he was driving past. Well, 30 years later, Max attempted to collect his busy mate, without so much as a peep from the stewards or the F1 media. Tell me Max is not protected, without telling me that pigs can fly. Anyway, this is not about the stewards and Johnny, so let us move on, yet again. In preparation for his coup de grace, Max's number one fan and image launderer set things up by admitting that he was Max's number one fan, who was standing by his opinion that Max was one of the very best that he has ever witnessed in 40 years. He was further standing by his opinion that Max had calmed down, matured and now played the percentage game, with 3 titles in his pocket. Well, let us ponder that opinion for a minute. The first title was stolen, and he cruised to the second and third, in a budget cap-assisted car, which made many angsty, and resulted in a dramatic drop in race attendance and television audience, but what the heck? If Max's number one fan, who after 40 years of Formula One, could not tell that Marcy was not entitled to rig a race, has determined that Max is the best ever, then it is what it is. By their words will they be judged. But here comes the pièce de résistance. Max's number one fan throws himself and his master under the bus, big style, by claiming that Max had placed a thin veneer over his default driving tactics, contrary to what he had come to believe. Yes folks, it's a he. But here I must confess to being bamboozled. Is the person that was a leading member of the fawning courtiers, who presented the emperor with his robes, now attempting to excuse himself by representing that the non-existent robes are in fact see-through? Or is he signaling his intention to depart the royal court? Well, do not ponder much further, because he goes on to offer an outrageous excuse, while claiming in his usual style of speaking out of both sides of his mouth, that he was making no excuse. But this excuse is worse than any he has ever offered up to date, including the ones he made for his fellow courtier, Michael Marcy. His excuse, believe it or not, is that the best he has ever witnessed in 40 years, despite his poor record in close quarters driving, could have been somewhat out of sorts during close quarter racing with an untitled Lando, because of the spat between his father and his team principal. Yes folks, think on that and let us have your views in the comments section. But our man, Martin Gopher Brundle, was not finished yet, no siree. He goes on to assert with a total lack of self-awareness that it was difficult for him to see Red Bull, damaging their credibility by telling Max over the radio that the collision was all Lando's fault. Imagine that. This man who has no credibility himself, because he incredibly attempted to grant Max, Red Bull and Michael Marcy fake credibility, is now pointing the finger. Their credibility was not damaged when they suborned Marcy to rig the Abu Dhabi race over the radio. Their credibility was not damaged when, on and off the radio, they routinely blamed Sir Lewis for collisions that Max had caused. They confidently applied these discreditable tactics, safe in the knowledge that they could rely on the unflinching support of Martin, who is now accusing them of damaging their credibility. Well, one thing is for sure, with praise singers like Martin Brundle, who needs any critics? Perhaps, just perhaps, during one of his grid walks, he will come across somebody who will disavow him of the false notion that he has any credibility. Forza Ferrari. Roll on, 2025.